Hi, this is National Master Ryan Velez, and I am going to teach you all how to defend against the four-move checkmate. I teach a lot of players in the Louisville, Kentucky area, and no matter how many times I talk about this, the four-move checkmate happens every single year, at least to a couple of students, and so I like to make a video on it to kind of show people how to prevent it and what to do. We're going to start off by showing you what the four-move checkmate looks like. Basically, there's two ways to do it. You can play Queen F3, and if Black plays a unfortunate move like this is one way to do it. The other way is to put the Queen on H5 like this and play accordingly. And so this is the other way to get the checkmate. The Queen F3 version is a little less scary, mostly because a lot of times players, you have these, whoever's playing the four-move checkmate establishes this little group attack against F7, but a lot of times players can just play knight F6 to stop that checkmate, even if they didn't know the checkmate threat existed, because this is such a commonly played move. A lot of people will just do it reflexively and not even realize there was a threat. At least beginning players anyway. So the scary version of the four-move checkmate occurs when you play Queen to H5. This not only puts a little bit of pressure here, but makes a direct threat to actually take the E5 pawn. And I'm going to pause at this point to show you that there are a couple of things that new players do that are always mistakes when it comes to attacking the queen. A lot of players are taught that when the queen comes out, you're supposed to attack it immediately, and in a lot of situations, this is actually not true. Here's a very clear example. If you play G6, using this advice, I'm going to attack the queen, and this is great, but the problem is you just lost a pawn, they are checking your king, and they're using a fork tactic to win your rook, and at this point, you're just going to be losing a lot of pieces, and it's really hard to recover from a mistake like this. The other mistake that's frequently played is people will play knight F6, trying to take the queen or whatever, but the problem is they just take the pawn, and now, once again, white is winning. And you don't want this to happen either. So attacking the queen when she comes out immediately is not always the best idea. Looking at what she's attacking and then defending the loose things, in this case, the E5 pawn, is the most important idea. So there's a couple of ways to defend it. You can play D6, but the problem with D6 is it blocks in your bishop. And anyone who's starting out chess will probably hear a chess coach or a friend say you shouldn't block in your pieces. And so D6 is not the best move here. The best move is just to simply play knight to C6, which defends the pawn adequately, and the queen can't take it safely anymore. But because she attacked that pawn, now it's white's turn. They have enough time to establish the attack against F7. So they now have this little group attack going on against F7, and a lot of players will make the mistake of trying to attack the queen too soon, and then the queen slips past the knight and gets a checkmate. So this is a loss for Black, and you want to avoid this at all costs. So the best idea here to stop the four-move checkmate is actually just to break the line of communication between the bishop and the queen. The first move to do this is G6. G6 prevents the queen from seeing F7 and attacks the queen. Notice the queen cannot take on E5 because the knight easily defends the square and would just capture. So we can't do that. So the queen, people who play the four-move checkmate will retreat their queen here, re-establishing the threat of checkmate on F7. Now they've basically set up the five-move checkmate. However, we're just going to use the same tactic that we used before. We're going to interrupt these lines of communication between the queen and the bishop, and we're going to destroy their group attack. So once the knight moves here, the queen can no longer see F7, and there's no more group attack on F7. So the last attempt to make progress is to play queen to B3. Now, this is a crummy move that I'm playing, but the threat is to take on F7 with check and to move the king up, and now we can't castle as Black, and we've lost a pawn, and so white can claim that they're winning after this move. At this point, there's not much hope for Black because his king is stuck in the middle, and he's down a pretty crucial pawn. But anyway, let's make a better move than a6. Obviously, that's no good. There are two moves here that work out very well for white, or for black. The first move is here. And I keep mentioning this idea of a group attack when you have multiple pieces attacking the same thing. Well, here, this is kind of like having a group defense. You've got two white pieces attacking f7, and you've got a king and a queen both defending. So since it's 2 versus 2, it balances out and everything is okay. However, when I was 13 years old, I started playing in tournaments for the first time. And at home, I had discovered that you can actually play this knight d4 move in this position. And so I worked it out, and it seemed pretty good. So in a tournament game against a 1,000 rated player, we got into this position, so I tried it. And he very quickly took my f7 pawn, and I was forced to move my king here. Now, my point in this position is that I am attacking the queen, I am attacking your bishop, and I'm threatening to get a fork on the king and the rook if the white queen, ever stops defending c2. So there's a lot going on here. Well, the only safe move for the queen is to play queen to c4, because you'll notice that the b3 square is attacked, the d5 square is attacked by the other knight, and the e6 square is attacked. So c4 is the only place with which the queen can defend the bishop on f7. Unfortunately, I'm able to chase the queen away with a further move. Notice my knight defends the pawn while the pawn attacks the queen. So at this point, my opponent plays a kind of a bad move, but to be honest, there's really not a lot of good moves here for him. And you can start to see why bringing your queen out so early in a chess game is such a detriment, because he's moved it so many times, and now he has to move it again, so he is attacking. Now in this position, there's a small fork with the king attacking, or the queen attacking the king and the pawn, and I could just move over and take the bishop, and I would be winning, and that would be fine. However, I chose to play d6, which simultaneously attacks my pawn defends my pawn and attacks the queen. So the problem with the queen here is that she has literally only one move to go, or one square that she can feel safe, and that's on c3. Because notice, if the queen moves to b4, I could play knight takes c2 with a threat against the queen and the king, like this. And that's a simple fork. If the queen moved to a3, I would still be able to take the queen on a3. And so that wouldn't work out very well for white. So white can't retreat that way. So their only safe move that the queen has is to actually play queen to c3. And again, in this position, I could easily just take the bishop, but I have a better move. I play knight takes e4, attacking the queen. And so the queen can't stay there because of the knight attack. And here's what's interesting. If she tries to go to h3, the bishop will take it. If she tries to go to g3, then the knight will take it. And then if she tries to go to f3, then the knight on d4 will take it. And if she tries to go to b3, the knight on d4 will also capture. And most interestingly, if she goes to b4, a3, or e3, then my knight on d4 will move to c2 with a fork on the king and the queen on any one of these, lit up green squares. I know this is a lot of arrows and it looks kind of silly, but the idea is the queen really can't go anywhere, and that's because black's entire army is attacking and we're developing pieces as we go. So the only safe move is queen to d3. And it does have the advantage of a small attack on the knight. I call attacks where one piece attacks one piece like this, I call them wimpy attacks or weak attacks. They're sometimes useful for gaining time, but in this position it's not that great. So I actually make use of this idea, and I retreat while attacking the queen at the same time. So just note that every single time they have to move the queen, we get to move, or they have to not develop pieces on the back row. So the queen moves back to c3, which is the only safe spot. And then I played b4, which is a very good move. The problem with b4 is if she takes, I take like this, and again I have a fork on the king and the queen, so that the pawn cannot safely be captured. So the queen moves back to c4, where she was a long time ago, And she is now defending the bishop again. And I remember loving this move right here because it was just I couldn't believe that my home preparation actually worked. This is the first time I ever prepared anything at home as a 1400, and it actually worked out. And so basically my knight is defending my bishop while attacking the queen at the same time. So the queen's only safe move is to go to d5. And then I played c6. And from this point, the pawn attacks the queen, and the queen has no safe squares. She is actually trapped. So my opponent got a little frustrated, understandably, and sacrificed the queen for the knight. I took back, and then the bishop comes down to b3, both saving itself from the enemy king up here, but also defending against the knight c2 threat. But I decided in this position to go ahead and continue for the knight c2 attack, and I kind of expected my opponent to resign at any moment here, but we were pretty young and inexperienced, so we played on, obviously. And then I played this bishop to b5 move, just trying to trade off his pieces, because if you're ahead in material, you want to trade off pieces to try to win. And he plays this counter-attacking move where instead of defending his bishop, he attacks my knight. So I took it, and then he took my knight, and then I played queen takes, winning another pawn. And just to finish out the game, he attacks me, using his knight. I retreat my queen to g4 with an attack on his pawn. And I thought here he might castle or play king f1 or something, but he doesn't do that. He actually blocked. And then I came down here with checkmate. And so that was a neat little 20-move game that I played. But you can see the 4-move checkmate is easy to punish because your opponent has to bring their queen out, they have to move it a whole lot, they don't get a lot out of it, and as you can see in this position, the final position, only one piece is actually off of the back row for white. This is not very good. So let's go back and look at another couple ways to defend. Almost every time a child or an experienced player plays e4, it's immediately followed up by e5. But one thing a lot of inexperienced players don't think about is you don't have to play e5. You can play e6. And e6 is very important because if they try the 4-move checkmate, if they're intent on doing it, this e6 pawn gets in the way of the bishop and the queen's communication at f7. So there is no checkmate on f7. So this can't work. The only downside to e6 is if they try to play, you can sometimes play this e5 or d5 move, and they'll might push to e5, and the problem is this bishop gets kind of stuck. And so one thing that I often recommend to people, especially newer players when they're learning, is they can play b6, and b6 is very useful because it allows you to develop every piece that you have, or at least every minor piece, without issue. Notice by moving just these two pawns, I was able to get this bishop to the long diagonal, which is very important. This bishop is helping defend this knight. It also prevents pins from the bishop g5, a possibility that white has. And I can castle, which is a pretty useful move in itself. So black does pretty well by doing that. So that's a way that you can play e6 to stop the possible 4-move checkmate, and your pieces won't get stuck. A third way to stop the 4-move checkmate is to simply prevent this bishop from getting to c4. The first way we stopped the 4-move checkmate was by blocking the queen's attacks and attacking the queen a whole lot. With the e6 stuff, it simply means that the bishop and the queen's communication from h5 and c4 can't work if the e6 pawn is in the way, like this. But this third way is a little different, and it's worth exploring. So let's look at it. So e5 or e4, c6, queen h5 is normal, and then d5. And now notice we're just attacking the c4 square. So if the bishop moves there, if the bishop moves there, we just take it. And I actually have had a game that occurred like this once when I was younger. My opponent was playing very reflexively, and I just took his bishop. So you obviously can't do that. So I've seen a lot of kids over the years in chess clubs and tournaments and such take the pawn, the c-pawn takes back. And again, you can't really put the bishop here because the pawn will take. So most kids will play this bishop b5 check move, which check on its own doesn't really do a whole lot. So you just block and then you get a good game. So the four-move checkmate is not really something that you have to worry about. You just have to recognize when it's happening to you and find a way to defend against it that suits the way that you want to play. You can either do this type of setup where you're, attacking the queen a whole lot. If you feel that that's too much to remember for your current level of chess, you can always do e6 and then the b6 move like this. Or lastly, you can play the c6 move and then d5 and just stop the bishop from getting to the c4 square, and you are now safe from their silly four-move checkmate threats. So this is National Master Ryan Velez, and I hope that this video was able to help you learn how to prevent the four-move checkmate from happening to you. Thank you very much. Goodbye.